Africa is only responsible for 4% of global emissions. As the world eyes net zero emissions by 2050, PwC's Africa Energy Review indicates that the continent is progressing positively in its efforts to make a clean energy transition. Pedro Omontuemhen, a PwC Africa oil and gas leader, joins us with more insight into the findings of the review. Thank you so much for your time, Pedro. Now, just reconcile for us how Africa has all this potential to meet its own energy demand and international demand, but yet we have this energy deficit on the continent.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me to this meeting. It's a pleasure to be here. So it's a paradox that though Africa is blessed with natural resources, both solar power, wind power, oil and gas, yet there's a huge deficit in electricity and power supply. So across the various countries in Africa, we've seen different ratios. Okay, so I'm sitting here in Accra this morning, having a meeting here in Accra. Ghana is quite high in the energy security. Nigeria, unfortunately, my country, is quite low. South Africa also have a bit of challenge. So, but there are three star performers in Africa as far as power security is concerned. So you've got Ghana, you've got Rwanda, and Kenya. They are quite high in the energy security. The rest of Africa is kind of struggling. North Africa is doing pretty well, but between Sub-Saharan Africa and Southern Africa, a bit of challenge.
Pedro, I must also ask you about fossil fuels and the role that they will play in the transition, because sometimes it can seem like one day we'll switch off the fossil fuels, and we'll switch on the renewables. But a transition needs to happen here. So let's talk about fossil fuels, specifically looking at Africa and how we're taking stock of the role they'll play leading up to the transition.
Okay, so we're not going to discard that in just a minute. Africa contributes just 4% of the global emission of CO2. So what we see is that fossil fuel will be used to finance the transition. We're going to depend on fossil fuel for our immediate needs, and even for the future, it's going to use to finance the transition to renewables. Look at what happened during the Russian-Ukraine war. Some countries in Europe that have long abandoned coal went back to coal to generate power. So Africa will continue to depend on fossil fuel for immediate need and to finance the transition to renewable energies in the long term.
Pedro, you talk about these countries that are making great progress in terms of energy security, Ghana, Rwanda, and Kenya. And I'm wondering what sets them apart, and also what is causing the others to fall behind. Is it also a case of maybe that they can't even see the low-hanging fruits there?
No, there are a lot of factors. So if you look at Ghana and Rwanda, for example, population is quite small. So again, let me compare Nigeria and Ghana. So Nigeria produces 4,000 megawatts of power for a country of 200 million plus people. Ghana has 3,000 megawatts of power for a country of 30 million people. So the volume of share production is, in Ghana compared to Nigeria can be a major issue. So but I think what Africa needs to do is to invest heavily in power generation. That will be investment in power generation and transmission and distribution. That investment, if not done timely and regularly, will cause a major issue in the long run.
But what we are also seeing is Northern Africa, the northern parts of the continent, really energy secure. And I'm wondering, if other regions, what we're seeing, for instance, in West Africa, with the reliance still on oil, in Southern Africa, huge challenges there as well, could not be in working better with Northern Africa to, export maybe gas or other kinds of, fuels for better energy security for the continent.
Yes, so North Africa has taken a lot of initiatives. There's huge investments. Don't forget, North Africa, besides being blessed with oil and gas, also have a lot of wind and solar power. And they are particularly now in a position where they are able to export power to the rest of Europe. They're just close to the Europe. Once you cross the Mediterranean, you're in Europe. So North Africa is, I think the combination of natural resources, leadership, and policy formulation and application of this policy over the years has kind of put North Africa miles apart the rest of Africa.
Pedro, you say that we need to invest heavily in power generation, but of course also to attract a lot of the investment, you need to have a proper plan in place. Do we have sufficient plans, strategies in place to attract that investment?
Yes. So why plans are important? Of course, the right investment is important, and financing from the rest of the world is important. So I think what Europe and America and the rest of Asia is looking for is consistency in policy. Sometimes we see in Africa policy somersaults. We start one and then we stop. And then, in Africa, once there's an election coming, we're always afraid if all the current policies of the current government will not be reversed by a new government. So, but what we need is to have consistent policy in place, government to government, doesn't matter which party is in power, then that will attract the right investment from the rest of the world to help us leapfrog our development.
I'm also keen to touch on the hydrogen economy and its viability for Africa, Pedro. What we've also seen is climate change really causing complications in terms of droughts and drier weather. I'm wondering how much potential hydrogen has for us, and if we should be also focusing on this investment, if there are green shoots across the continent.
Okay, so I think what we always need to focus on is energy mix, okay? We're not going to meet all of our needs from just one source, okay? We will need hydrogen, we will need fossil fuel, we will need biomass, we need everything to be in the mix. Okay? No one country in Africa is going to meet all its needs from just one source of energy. So hydrogen is important, but it's not going to solve all of the problems that we're facing at the moment.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your insights, just laying the table for us on what the current state of energy in Africa is and what the future of African energy should look like. That was Pedro Omontuemhen, PwC Africa Oil and Gas Leader.